This is your Day X World War III update. You know, isn't it fascinating how the focus of our collective attention shifts faster and faster? 1 second, we're transfixed on what's going on with the Ukraine-Russian nuclear situation. The next minute, we're focused on Aleppo that collapses at a staggering lightning speed that nobody could have anticipated. The next minute, we're over here in South Korea, where the most impromptu imposition of martial law in South Korea's history, like just abrupt and sudden imposition of martial law, and as quickly as it came, it was repealed by the parliament. Now, I don't know if it's officially been abrogated yet by the president yet. We'll talk about the real reasons and the underlying issues as to why this happened and what it really means, because it has a lot to do with World War III, you guessed it, as does everything nowadays. But this is a testament not only to how fast things are speeding up and just the overall, dare I use the religious term, the quickening of things. It's like things start to unravel quicker and quicker and quicker. And the more you have conflict, when you're in a globalized world, one region of instability increases and exacerbates all other potential regions of instability, especially when you start to bifurcate into East and West more and more each day. So every time a conflict flares up in one part of the world and people are forced to take a side, that intensifies and amplifies other conflicts in other regions. North Korea and Ukraine are a great example of this. The Ukraine war has had the effect of worsening relations drastically between South Korea and North Korea, to the point where you now have a South Korean president who is so concerned, and completely and 100% backed by the United States, by the way, about maintaining power and possibly ceding some power to people who might be sympathetic to the North Korean cause. At least that's what we're told, but I'll talk about why that's a futile pursuit anyways, because vassalage is dependence, and unfortunately the South Koreans are heavily dependent on the United States. They've kind of screwed themselves like most vassals have. But this is just an incredible, we don't know what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Tomorrow, Iran could do the long-anticipated attack. We could have a break of the ceasefire. We could have Iranians send military into Damascus to support Assad. I mean, we could have the Russians send more fighter jets into Iran. Like, the more and more time goes on, the more tense the situation gets. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that the volatility is going to diminish after January 20th. We are quickly starting to realize that that is not going to be the case. We're going to be entertained far better than the guy who can barely talk or walk up a flight of steps. But unfortunately, I don't think that the global geopolitical instability is going to be remedied at all. Now, I want to, before we get into today's news, I want to address a comment that I made yesterday. I was talking about winter preparedness because, of course, there's been a lot of wacky weather going on right now, big snowstorms, and I gave you guys 4 critical pointers. It really should have been 5, but regardless, I've done extensive amounts of videos on winter survival. This is probably the most comprehensive video we've done. It's all about winterizing your vehicle, and pretty much no stone is left unturned with respect to winter prepping, especially in this video, okay? But the problem is that I presume sometimes people have common sense knowledge about these things, and not everybody does. Not because they're stupid, just because, just like me, maybe you didn't get into prepping until later in life, and a lot of common sense things weren't that common to you. Now, I made a statement about using space heaters inside vehicles in order to keep warm. I talked about keeping your gas tank topped off, making sure you had good clothing, good boots in case you had to bug out from your vehicle if it's gridlock after nuclear bomb goes off, when chances are, at least here, 6 months out of the year, it's going to happen in winter time. If World War III breaks out, it's going to start in winter. So you have to have a plan because the roads are going to be impassable, it's going to be gridlock, it's going to be cold out, and you got to find a way to get home. So you have to have full tank of gas, way to keep warm using some kind of alternative heating source, a space heater that's independent of the engine of your vehicle. You have to have warm clothing, And you also have to have a lot of food because, of course, you're burning a lot of calories when your body's trying to keep warm. The last thing I should have mentioned, and these are just the most essential, we go over like hundreds of things in this video, is having a set of either booster cables, but more ideally, you would have a portable jump starter pack, okay? Now, what I didn't mention in that video, and somebody was, I think it was one of the most liked comments, and it's not because I'm being careless, it's just that I assume that people understand these things. And it's not only that, usually it's written right on the top of whatever kind of unit you're going to do. By law, it has to be. It's that if you're going to be using these propane space heaters indoors, you have to have ventilation, okay? Because, of course, carbon monoxide can build up. Now, fortunately, 90% of these units, and probably the reason why I don't mention it that often, because not only do I assume it's common sense, but 90% of these units have low oxygen detectors, and they'll automatically shut off if the oxygen is so low that you're going to die from carbon monoxide poisoning, which is incredibly rare from propane. It's not rare from other things like chimneys and things of that nature. But I would strongly recommend that you get yourself a miniature propane heater, a space heater. You can get a big one like this. This is a heat hog. So this is 20,000 BTUs approximately. And you pair that with something like this. This is something that will fit in any vehicle. It's enough propane to get you, if you use it sparingly and you ration it, this will easily take you a couple days. That doesn't mean you're going to have the thing turned on the whole time. You're going to want to make sure that you're, well dressed, and wherever possible, as we talk about in this video, you can see I have the thermal reflective bubble wrap in there. There's lots of tips and tricks that you can use to insulate your space, so you can potentially stretch it out. This is a smaller unit, something you might use for like a small RV or a minivan. But if you are just wanting something for your car, you might want to get one of these miniature units that just runs on the 1 liter propane tanks, which don't last that long. But again, it's better than dying, okay? So those are just a few tips. And yes, use it in a ventilated space. I'll post the links to the heat hogs in the description below. Make these preparations now before winter gets crazy, because it's going to serve you no good if you're ordering it after, a big blizzard or a winter storm. Okay, now let's get to the news. What's going on in the news? Okay, well, I guess we can talk a little bit more, as I started the day talking about the situation in South Korea. I'm not sure if you guys heard of it. This is getting weird, man. It's really only a matter of time before the bird flu thing. We got UK stockpiling 5 million vaccine doses. You can't tell me that the UK has money to throw around like this. The United States is buying 10 million doses, and we even got this mysterious illness that we have to talk about. This probably should be the breaking news, that there's a mysterious illness in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that is very fatal. It's killed 143 people, and I'll talk about the symptoms, but they're very flu-like symptoms. So this is not like an Ebola or something. This is very likely something that, I shouldn't say very likely, but there's a possibility this is an airborne transmitted virus. And if that's the case, then our world is about to change in a big, big way. Here is the president singing American Pie to Joe Biden, okay? So I'm not sure if you guys remember this. It's actually a pretty good rendition for a non-English native speaker. And here is what happened today, where martial law was briefly imposed. Now, what this was a demonstration of force, because you had the military meeting with the president prior to this, and there was rumors up until it happened that he was meeting with the highest ranking generals in the military, and he said that we're imposing martial law. And so all the military went along with this. As you can see, the military stormed the parliament. They followed orders to a T. If he had told them to start opening fire on protesters, they might have started doing that, okay? Now, this is not unprecedented for North Korea. or for South Korea, I should add. For example, almost every president since 1948, every president in South Korea has been either overthrown, assassinated, removed by a military coup, sentenced to a prison sentence after their tenure. That's what happens most recently, either impeached, investigated for crimes, arrested for corruption, impeached. It just goes one after the other. Impeached, removed by military, overthrown, assassinated, and that's basically the story. The only guy who has not been imprisoned yet is the most recent president that preceded this one, Moon Jae-in, and he has not been imprisoned yet. But I believe that Yoon Suk Yeol had put out an arrest warrant for him today. That's the current president. And of course, this guy is likely going to be impeached and possibly imprisoned as well. But typically, impeachment is not a sufficient motivation. Usually, it's some remedial terms that's reconciled with. It's not something you tend to go to jail over if you're impeached necessarily. Of course, it's very cutthroat, as you can see, but I don't think it's necessarily existential for the president. So to go to the extent of imposing martial law must mean that they know something about what might be coming, okay? They know something, the day X is approaching, I do believe. There are rumors that the opposition, well, not just rumors, I mean, this is common knowledge, it's very explicit that they are perhaps slightly more sympathetic to North Korean reconciliation and wanting to have better diplomatic relations with the North Koreans. The problem is when you're under the vassalage of the United States or any major hegemon, you end up doing things that antagonize your opponent. This opponent in this case is the North Koreans. So the South Koreans end up doing things like, allowing the United States to come in with their nuclear submarines and doing all these military exercises. And of course, I'm sure there's a little bit of jealousy there because, quite frankly, the South Koreans have no sanctions. The North Koreans are one of the most sanctioned nations on earth. And as such, the South Korean economy is something to the effect of 10 to 20 times better than the North Korean economy, probably even more than that. It's one of the most, per capita powerful economies in the world and most advanced, technologically advanced societies in the world. And as such, when you feel emboldened, when you have US nuclear submarines behind you, you're probably more prone to poke at the bear. I don't know what North Korea's spirit animal is, the Russian bear, the American eagle, the Chinese dragon. I don't know what North Korea's is. But, when you're poking the North Koreans, they're eventually going to become very contemptuous towards you. And the enmity is going to thicken day by day. And so now, if the United States were to pull its support, so all these people who are talking like we want to have some rapprochement with the North Koreans and potentially work towards reunification once again, which seems like we're like 10 years behind where we were just a year ago now, after everything that's happened in the past year as a result of North Korea's support to Ukraine, and of course the NATO expansion to the east. Essentially, we're in a predicament where now, if you were to take that support, if the U.S. withdrew their military and their submarines, then the North Koreans would be in a much better position because, of course, they have nuclear weapons. So then they could then hold South Korea for ransom. So long as South Korea doesn't have nuclear weapons, it is going to be beholden to the United States. So this is why there's all this talk about South Korea now getting nuclear weapons, so it can truly be rid of this vassal relationship with the United States and not have to be in this extortion racket of sorts, which is what the United States, the sword of Damocles it holds over all of its vassal states. Poland is no different. If Poland ever starts to turn around and talk tough to the United States, like, we're not going to participate, we're not going to support you in Ukraine, okay, we're not going to send you all that military equipment that we promised. And the military equipment we did send you, we're not going to send you any more ammo for it. Okay, so you see how this goes? So they form a dependency. Same thing with Germany. Germany is absolutely screwed. Germany is the United States bitch through and through. Annalena Baerbock today went to China, of all places. An economy which is 10 times bigger than Germany's. Maybe not 10 times, but much bigger than Germany's. And she's lipping off to the Chinese, you know, giving them ultimatums about all these things that they need to change with their society. And it's just like the audacity to do that. You would only do that if you were sent to do that by your master, okay? So this is the problem, and this is why even if they were to get rid of this president, whoever is next in line is going to get taken into a back room, and they're going to be told, hey, if you don't play ball like we want you to play ball, we're going to take, you see this big Navy and all these aircraft carriers just down the road here? Yeah, we're going to move those somewhere else. And we're just going to let North Korea have its way with you. And Russia. And China. Right? Because South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, these are sitting ducks when it comes to, which is not to say it'd be easy, because of course one's a bottleneck peninsula and the others are islands. It's not easy to take islands, at least not by conventional means. Nonetheless, these are non-nuclear states surrounded by a bunch of nuclear states. Without the United States, they're totally fucked. So there's something bigger going on here, okay? This is the president saying, look, if I wanted to, I could have told these guys to be packing ammunition. I don't think, it didn't look like their weapons were loaded at all. They didn't have magazines in their weapons. So, you know, these guys don't know what the hell they got night vision on, and they're just completely out of sorts. These guys are not ready for a war with the North Koreans, much less, or their own people, much less the North Koreans, okay? So there's all kinds of rumors about what might have precipitated this, fears that he was going to be impeached. Again, these are things that have remedial consequences at best. Is there some corruption and allegations involving his wife? Yes, there's scandals and this and that. But to go to this extent and to actually think that it was going to work when the majority of the government in Parliament, I just got to tie up my shoe, is against you, and you know that they would vote it out immediately, and you try to go to the Parliament to interdict them having a vote on the process, and they go and they do it anyways, and they sneak in the building. It seems kind of weird. Mind you, I don't think he's officially abrogated entirely yet, so something to keep in mind. What else do we got going on today? Yeah. So now, you know this conversation about Jake Sullivan, how he's talking about, we don't think that sending nuclear weapons to Ukraine. Again, a year ago, that would have been laughed out of the room. Jean-Pierre, whatever her name is, she would have just laughed at that. Okay, now you have Jake Sullivan answering it in a serious way. This is all just to acclimatize us to that conversation. Bring the discourse a little bit closer. First, it's the most outlandish of outlandish ideas. Just like when Biden used to say, remember when he used to say World War III? Do you remember that? And I'm pretty sure that was in reference to something which was much more down the escalatory ladder than launching ATACMS missiles into Russia as Ukrainian invades. I think that was something to the effect of, was it like troops on the ground, but it was not troops that were going to be directly fighting on the front line. It was something that was far less severe than what we're doing now. And all of a sudden, here we are. We're well ahead of that in terms of the escalation ladder. So now you have this Alexei Goncharenko has argued that NATO membership will not be sufficient protection. Remember, Ukraine, in contrast to the Iranians, they have nuclear power plants already. So they're already in possession of nuclear material. They have NATO behind them. They're developing their own ballistic missile capability. And they now have a nuclear weapons delivery platform, an aviational one in the form of the F-16. So they are actually closer to having nuclear power. Plus, they have all the Soviet-era intelligence, if however many of those guys are still alive. They still have the scientists and the know-how, presumably, because a lot of Russia's brain power was in Ukraine. And a lot of them remain there, and some of them, of course, remain loyal to the West. So for them to make this a reality would not be that difficult. And I don't think any of these politicians would be saying anything unless the Trump team was somewhat sympathetic to this idea. I'm not saying they're going to approve it at all. I'm just saying that you're not going to do anything at this point in time that's going to really piss off Trump, okay? And every indication so far is that the Trump team is only going to escalate this problem. There has been zero indications whatsoever, aside the usual superlative-laden rhetoric from Donald Trump. I'm going to stop World War III, the bestest ever, blah, blah, blah. Nothing specific about, the missiles being launched. Somebody wrote a comment the other day, maybe, it's all about silence, and he's employing the silent strategy. When, in Trump's career, has he ever employed a strategy of silence? Never once. This guy talks more than anyone else. It's usually quite entertaining. But in terms of, speaking softly and carrying a big stick, that doesn't tend to be the Trump strategy. If anything, it's the exact opposite. So this thing is going to ramp up, and it's going to get a lot worse. I'm really curious to see the outcome of Tucker Carlson's interview with Sergei Lavrov tonight. Because if you want to know what's going to happen, listen to Sergei Lavrov. I've said this time and time again. People forget. All the normalcy normies right now, they're starting to go back to sleep again. I can hear them because nothing has happened in a week or so on the Russian-Ukrainian front. Just watch. What that means is that they're planning something much, much, much bigger. You should be, I don't want to say be grateful, and I don't want to, say be at ease by any stretch of the imagination, but you should, when things are happening, that's when you kind of know they're occupied. It's when they're quiet. That's when you know they're planning big plans, because you can only plan big plans when you're not focused on these little skirmishes and these little tactical things. Right now, they're about to go strategic. And Sergei Lavrov was the person who said, the Russian foreign minister, he distinctly said about 3 or 4 months ago, the decision to send Storm Shadows, long-range ATACMS, and allow Ukraine to use these inside Russia has been made. Okay? Then what happened? It died down. Trump got elected. People were lighting up my inbox. See, nothing's going to happen, right? What happened? Exactly what Lavrov said. Because he knows. He doesn't bullshit. So I'm very interested to see what the outcome is of this interview with Tucker. I'm not sure when it's going to be released. He just announced it before I made this video. But that is going to be very, very revealing. According to VTB CEO, Russian CEO Andrei Kostin, who's very well connected, the West has decided not to return approximately $300 billion in frozen Russian sovereign assets. Most people attribute the sudden rise in gold in the last year or so to this particular issue, because of course people lack faith in the U.S. Fiscal system, and as such, this means that people are moving into gold as much as they're moving into dollars. A move linked to sanctions imposed due to Russia's actions in Ukraine. There are rumors that they're not going to get it back. I've talked about how what they're doing right now is they're using the interest earned, or the revenue earned off of this $300 billion, which is invested across Western banks. They're using that in order to fund Ukraine's war. They're giving that money to Ukraine. The problem with that is debasement and depreciation of the currency that it's in. So that means that eventually this $300 billion will be worth $250 billion. So you are eroding the purchasing power of this, which is why gold is going up. If they outright say that they're not giving the money back, which is the trajectory we're currently on, because they don't want to do that until they've gotten everything they need from Russia. And that even includes all of the sanctions that they're circumventing with the ghost, what do they call them? The ghost fleets that, smuggle oil and liquefied natural gas into Europe. They have to be independent of that first because Russia can cut them off. So they're not ready to officially come out and say, we're confiscating these $300 billion in assets. When that happens, gold goes to the moon. All right? China, rare mineral export ban. China has banned the export of key minerals such as gallium, germanium, and antimony, crucial for semiconductor chips and military technologies. This is seen as a retaliatory move against U.S. export controls on Chinese chip technology. Of course, we have Trump coming in with the threats, the tariff threats. If you think that it's bad now, just wait. I need you to seize the opportunity for all these deals and this supply glut that you're seeing in these stores that are giving these massive discounts right now. Seize on that, because that could be ending. This is the end of it. It's not could be ending. This is the end of that. 100%. Trump has, of course, issued a strong warning stating that those holding U.S. hostages by January 20th would face severe consequences and called for their immediate release. Now, I don't have the exact quote in front of me. Actually, I might, but it was incredibly aggressive. And I'm not sure what more you can do that hasn't already been done. There are approximately 200,000 casualties by best estimates. I'm presuming at least 100,000 dead. You don't destroy that much of a region and have people sleeping in tents, especially as it's in the colder season, relatively speaking there, and malnourished, and not have over 100,000 casualties easily. All right. Those responsible, he says, will be hit harder than anybody else has been hit in a long and storied history of the United States of America. What can they do that hasn't already been done? Send in SEAL Team 6? I'm sure they've already done that or tried that. In fact, I think they tried that at the beginning of the war and it kind of failed. I'm sure that they've provided Israel with all of these spec ops capabilities. So I don't know what they can do aside continue to do. This is just tough talk. This is, it's guaranteeing. And the whole ceasefire thing, that's just for Israel to buy time so that when Trump gets in, that's when they can go and finish the job. They're going to see how far these so-called rebels can get in Syria. Right now, they're beating on Hamas' door, which is, just down the road from Aleppo on the way to Damascus. And they're trying to cut off Hezbollah from supplies, okay, in Syria. I don't have the map in front of me right now. There was another statement that was made by the IDF or the commander of the IDF today that I think this would have been at the policy level, so it would have been perhaps the Israeli defense minister. He said that if the ceasefire fails, they are going to hold the Lebanese military accountable. So that means that they're going to go to war, not only with Hezbollah, but the Lebanese military as well. So I think what they're banking on is two things. One, waiting for Trump to get into power and waiting to see if ISIS and friends can create enough chaos in Syria to make it untenable and thus not be a route to supply weapons through into Lebanon. I think that's what they're banking on. But we'll see. Time will tell. We got all kinds of crazy shit. The Iraqis are moving troops towards the border. We have massive convoys moving towards the border. There were some warthogs that were up in the air who were targeting some of these ragtag forces, PMC, Iraqi, Iranian-backed militia groups. And remember, everything started in Syria for Iran. It wasn't really a do with Hamas that the war between Israel and Iran started. It was when Israel hit the Syrian consulate, the Iranian consulate in Syria, and killed a couple of their brigadier generals. That's what started this. So this war starts in Syria. So now when you have the Iranian foreign minister heading, or actually the Iranian prime minister, Pezeshkian, heading to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin soon, so they say, and you have him saying that we're going to send troops. We're going to actually send the Iranian military not the IRGC. At least that's based on the information I've heard. It's not the IRGC, it's the actual Iranian military. We're going to send them into Syria to help support the Assad regime. That puts Iranian troops right in the mix. And of course, the potential, then Israel has to be incredibly careful, because Iran is willing, and they're already pledging on the basis of the deaths of only 4 soldiers and no noticeable damage via satellite to Iranian facilities, and not nearly as much as it's being hyped up to be by the Israelis. They're willing to do another massive missile bombardment of Israel. That's what they're pledging. So could you imagine what will happen when you have Iranian soldiers inside Syria and then they get clipped by American or Israeli fighter jets? That's when things get crazy, and that's when, all this talk of a region-wide war, people just presume that means, I guess, Israel getting in a shooting match with Iran. This is what they mean by that. And then it spills over into other countries. It all started with Hamas, and it went to Hezbollah, Syria. It's going to go back to Hezbollah. Israel is just reloading. Their economy is in the shitter because there's not enough people to work. And all their guys now have PSD from slaughtering women and children. So, it takes time to bring in some fresh blood, right? Here's what's going on in Georgia. Maidan coup 2.0, they're saying. Now, I don't know if you can really call it that, because Georgia is a country of 3.7 million versus Ukraine, which was 10 times that. So it's going to be more inconsequential. But nonetheless, this is a war between East and West. And I think I said it probably 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago now maybe. I think it was 2.5. I said that when you have one major fire like Ukraine, it starts throwing out sparks everywhere else, right? Throws out sparks to Moldova, throws out sparks to Georgia, Azerbaijan, Iran, Syria gets a little unstable, North Korea gets a little unstable. And the more these things get unstable, the greater the likelihood that there's bifurcation into East and West, and a greater chance of those countries that are aligned starting to form military pacts. And that's what we've seen. And so it increases the likelihood that we're going to see an actual full-blown world war, which is what we call Day X. Because you can only have that war once, right? And the idea, the theory behind Day X is that because they understand how sensitive the escalation ladder is, nobody wants to cross that line, because they know that once you cross a certain line, it's almost like there's a runaway effect, right? And then things can rapidly spiral out of control. Now, I'm not 100% convinced of that. I've talked about how I think they could in some way have a normalization of low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. I could see that happening at some point. But there is, because everything's interconnected, because, there's just increasing tensions between both sides, if one thing pops off in one place, things could pop off in another place at the exact same time. And the likelihood of that increases as this global turmoil ensues. So a great example of that would be something like if the United States and Russia got in a shooting match with nuclear weapons, the thinking is that either side, most likely the United States, because at least right now on paper, the Chinese and the Russians are aligned, the United States is going to throw a lot of weight at China as well. China could do nothing, and they would still be a target, because the thinking is that you don't want China to be the last man standing, in that you have the Russians and the United States destroy each other. So the United States is forced then to throw a bunch of heat at the Chinese as well. So it's a scorched earth policy of sorts. If we go mad, we really go mad. Everybody gets some. North Korea, China, Pakistan, anybody with nukes, anyone who is our adversary gets hit regardless of whether they're directly colluding with a nuclear adversary or not. Talked about Iran's potential support, military support for Syria, which is going to be a major escalation. China has vowed to help Syria, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. Of course, all sides taking a side. So you have the China rare earth mineral export ban, retaliation from a threat of tariffs. Now you have China supporting Syria. Vowed to help Syria, expressing concern over recent jihadist attacks, who many are saying are tacitly endorsed by the United States and Israel. And Ukraine. This is where it gets interesting. They're using a lot of drone technology, which was originally innovated by ISIS, but it actually was then started to become commonly used and then perfected in the Ukraine war. And now there's advisors from Ukraine on the ground helping these rebel Turkish groups assist in the takeover and the collapse of Assad, who's of course backed by the Russians. So the Ukrainians have a vested interest in stirring up trouble here in order to pull Russian resources towards this region. And the Russians have to support Assad. Okay, it's imperative. It's like a linchpin. If you let that go, all hell could potentially break loose, and then next on the chopping block is going to be Iran, who I think by that time they'll have come under Russia's nuclear umbrella. Ukraine and Syria. Ukraine supported the attack on Aleppo in Syria and supplied weapons to the militants. Russia's permanent representative to the UN Security Council has claimed. And Beijing emphasizes its role as a friend of Damascus. Jace Medical sent me a message today. If you don't know who they are, they're the suppliers of, they initially started with antibiotics to preppers to give you a very low drag, a very easy access to prescription antibiotics and other forms of medicine, saving you that uncomfortable conversation that you might have to have with your physician about, hey, I'm a prepper and I'm trying to stockpile this stuff because the supply chains are going to be broken if shit hits the fan. They save you all of that. It's quick, it's painless. I'll post a link in the description. Stock up on antibiotics. You're going to need these. People are going to die because we're so soft as is. People think, oh, well, people survived, for hundreds of years. Yes, but antibiotics have saved the lives of billions of people. And nowadays, especially, people are way too soft. We're not cut for the post-apocalyptic landscape. You're going to need antibiotics. In fact, I'm in the process right now of learning how to make penicillin. But in addition to that, you can get other chronic medications with relative ease and get a healthy stockpile of those. But they're saying that the proposed tariffs on Chinese imports, particularly pharmaceuticals, could lead to increased medication prices in the United States. This is especially concerning for generic drugs, many of which are produced in China, potentially exacerbating supply chain disruptions. So, if you thought 2024 was interesting, wait for 2025. I don't doubt that, in theory, ideologically speaking, what Trump is doing makes sense. Bring the jobs back to the United States. But you're going to try to do that with an entitled population that doesn't want to do the work, that doesn't want to work in a factory. And unfortunately, we're not there yet with automation and fancy robots, so it's going to be a while. It's going to take a long time. Sacrifices are going to have to be made. And that's what's not being told to the American public enough. Yes, we can build back. We can have American Dream 2.0, but it's going to take a decade or so, in the very least, assuming the war doesn't start before that. Okay. Now, we got an unknown disease currently affecting the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'll just put this up as a placeholder. 143 deaths, unknown disease. Now, fortunately, within this region, it is not incredibly industrialized, so there's not a lot of flights to and from this region. Nonetheless, we still live in a globalized world, and there still is traffic. So the likelihood that this will spread, even if locally, and slowly spill over regionally, and then inevitably it's going to leave the African continent and it's going to go throughout the world, is probably very likely, presuming that this isn't just something that is due to a waterborne pathogen or something that is more benign. Unknown disease has killed 143 people in the southwestern province of Kwango, Democratic Republic of Congo. Infected individuals showed flu-like symptoms, including high fever and severe headaches. A medical team has been sent to the Panzi Health Zone to collect samples and identify the disease. Pansy is a rural area facing difficulties in accessing medicines and healthcare resources. Women and children are the most severely affected by the disease, they claim. So why would that be? Why would women and children be more disproportionately affected? Are they doing something that maybe the men aren't doing? Is it something with the water? Do they have more exposure? I don't know. WHO involvement, the World Health Organization, every prepper's best friend, sarcasm, has been alerted and is collaborating. Oh, we're good hands then, aren't we? Is collaborating with the DRC ministry to investigate further. Bird flu. The UK government has agreed to a contract for more than 5 million doses of human H5 influenza vaccine. You know, knowing what we know about bird flu and knowing what we know about the panic they created over a virus that killed what? Depending on your age bracket, between 0.1 to 1%, and that is generous. I think it was more like 0.1% across the board people who got it. Knowing what we know about how they overblew that, and knowing what we know about bird flu, which in the worst strains can kill like 60% of the people that it infects, why are they being so quiet about this while stockpiling vaccines? Something is weird about this, okay? Bird flu is now everywhere, and where is the panic? Where is the concern? You would rightfully think that there should be a concern at this point in time if, you know, what we know about bird flu is true. Bird flu is a real killer. This is not something to be messed with. One of the things that I've always been worried about, especially after the pandemic, is that eventually a real virus is going to come around and nobody is going to believe the government that it's a real thing and that it's bad and that it's really, really killing people. I mean, COVID is bad, don't get me wrong. Like, getting COVID and getting a bad version of it, even if you don't die, is something you remember. Okay, I remember the 2 times I got it. I don't remember all the other times I got sick because something that's like an alien virus. It was like something, you know, now they're talking about how there's evidence that it was made in a lab. I mean, stuff we knew for years, but now it's official. It just felt foreign. It felt synthetic. You know, the sickness, it felt weird. It's like I was going to make a comparison, but we're not going to go there. Anyways, they're spending millions of dollars on this. So for a country that is having a lot of debt, a lot of socioeconomic issues, for them to be dumping tens of millions of dollars for a vaccine that by the time the virus gets here, the vaccine is not even going to be matched to the actual virus itself because they change every year. It just doesn't make any sense, you know? And the United States is doing this as well. Now, bird flu is endemic. It's everywhere in the Californian water supply. They're finding it. There's been many unexplained cases where they don't know where the, what would you call it, the progenitor, or what is the term that they use? Not patient zero, but they don't know the source, where the person contracted it. So the person never had contact with birds, and they somehow got bird flu. And in some cases, it's been, I don't think it's been quite fatal yet, but these people have gotten really ill, like this teenager in British Columbia recently. So this is probably going to be on the 2025 bingo card, possibly 2024, when they're going to bust this out, if they're just going to wait for Trump to get in there. The U.S., which has recorded 57 human cases across the state since April, has announced that it will double its stockpile of bird flu vaccine to 10 million by the spring. Another internet cable was cut in, where was this one? In between Sweden and Norway, I believe. Anyways, there's been lots of these cables cut, far more than is typical. And of course, we can't rule out sabotage and that there isn't some hybrid warfare that is going on right now. Anything that they can maintain plausible deniability, we're going to see a ratcheting up of those type of attacks. Russia is deploying 300,000 more soldiers to Ukraine after completing an extensive military training program. Kremlin's determination, the move is intended to show Russia's continued commitment to the war in Ukraine over 30% of Russia's national budget has been allocated to defense in some way, shape, or form. 30%. That is insane. What else do we got to talk about here before we wrap this up? Yes, Germany is just waffling all over the place. Olaf Scholz and Zelensky were chatting it up today. Big protests today that you didn't even hear about in Parliament. You know why you didn't hear about them? Because it was actual Jewish people protesting against what many are terming the Israeli genocide. So it's funny how they don't make a big deal out of it when it's actual Jewish people who are promoting or against the war crimes currently being committed. My kind of people right here. These are my kind of folks. Most of the actual anti-war crowd are people from a Jewish background. So, it's important to keep that in mind, that there's a lot of people who don't agree, who could, if they wanted to, move to Israel. Iranian president to meet with Putin to discuss Syrian crisis. Talked about that. The U.S. has activated a communication channel with Russia on the Syrian developments. If only they could activate one over the issues that are going on in Ukraine. Showed you that video there. Talked about Trump's tough talk. This is the Russian naval base. So we have December 1st, and then we have December 3rd right here. Ships are there, then they're gone. Ships are there, then they're gone. This is the naval base in Syria, okay? So they moved all these assets because they were genuinely concerned that this naval base would have been overrun. And had that happened, I think we would have seen a rapid deterioration in relations between Turkey in particular and Russia, but just NATO in general, and Israel and Russia. Russians have been ousted from the nuclear research in Switzerland, so the final remaining scientists who were working on the CERN project, who knows what the hell they're really using this thing for, well beyond my pay grade, looking for God particles and whatnot. Well, they don't want the Russians to have that knowledge because, of course, the Russians could take that back and potentially weaponize it like we want to. So the Russians helped us build it, and now we're going to kick them out. There was another pipeline, the Druzhda pipeline, which was sabotaged in Poland, I believe. So the Druzhda pipeline transports oil from Russia to Germany, and there's two branches of it. One goes down to Hungary, Slovakia, and Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic. And, oddly enough, the Druzhba pipeline through Ukraine, I believe this one is still operational, but it expires this year. So that's it. That's all. Oh, yeah. And turns out Trump took a jab at Trudeau and said that, well, if you're going to keep hitting us up for $100 billion in tariffs, then we're going to you could become a state, the 51st state, and you could be governor of that state, he claimed, which could actually backfire because chances are the majority of Canadians, even though they're fed up with Trudeau, might not vote for Trump. And because we're the most populous country, even more populous than we would be the most populous state, more populous than California. We'd have the most electoral votes, and that would likely sway the whole election. So the whole entire American electoral system would be, put into an imbalance as compared to what you're used to. So I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, it'd be nice to get more guns. At this point, what do we have to lose? And have more gun rights, but I'm sure it would be some weird California situation anyways, and we would just not be afforded all of those great amendments, First Amendment, Second, Third, all the constitutional stuff you guys have. Go check this out. I'm going to post a link to this in the description. This is by far one of the most comprehensive guides to SHTF ever put out by a government, in my personal opinion. In the sense that it gets you thinking about things that would not normally be told in a typical 72-hour guide. I believe this was put out by the Lithuanian government. Lithuania, or it might be Latvia, actually. I did a whole video on this. Somebody sent me a actual copy, a PDF of the translated version. I had to translate it myself. and I had to use this other program, and I didn't put it into a PDF, but this is interesting because it really talks about all of the Mad Max type stuff. I mean, it starts off all cute with, you know, the bug out bag and the 72-hour, this and that. But then it really gets into the nitty-gritty about how to survive in a war zone and the tricks and schemes that people are going to attempt to use against you. It really gets dark, man, for such a, you know, Mickey Mouse looking document with all the very, you know, clip art style animations. Anyways, guys, if you want to pick up a heat hog, go through the link in the description below. I would encourage you to go and check out, what we got here, we got some font going on. Go and check out our video, How to Survive in a Snowstorm in Your Vehicle. We got some Normalcy Norman. There was a pretty funny skit we did at the beginning. By the way, Normalcy Norman's making a comeback very soon. There's a whole other story arc with that guy. And we got another Christmas Carol type video that he's going to make a cameo in also, I think. I am told. And you want to stick around for that, because we like to have a little bit of fun on this channel too, contrary to what a lot of people think. Thanks for watching, my friends. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.